Let's make the magic happen. Perfect. So thanks everyone for joining us today. So my name is Alex, and I'm going to tell you more about UX in the age of GenAI, how we can make our features more usable, trusted, and used. So as Dustin said, I'm with Algolia. I'm part of the business and optimization team. Really interested and hooked by product, user experience, web, GenAI, and travel, generally speaking. So if any of those topics is an interest of yours, just come reach out. And I live in Bordeaux those days. So that's for me. The idea of the talk today is really much to share with you my learning journey in terms of search on generative AI, right? So sharing with you my observation, my learnings. A lot of the content I'm going to present with you to you today is based on the work I get to do here at Algolia, but also research publicly available on the internet. May this come from IBM, from Nielsen Norman Group, or Google. And I will invite you to follow up on this session and go check out those different resources. So this is really much sharing my learning, and it's not meant to be exhaustive nor give you tips to apply right away, but more to raise awareness and for you to really kind of perceive the creation of GenAI products from a new angle. A few words about Algolia. So Algolia, we're a hosted search API. This is where we come from originally. The company was created back in 2012. And now we deliver an API for any kind of business interested in building strong search and discovery experience. Our mission is to understand people's intent and instantly show them what they're looking for. We do that through deep understanding, ease of use. We're very well known for developer focused and centricity. Also our speed, we evangelize, and we've been leading the industry toward as-you-type search, also named instant search. We've been very pioneer in this. And scale. Scale because as of today, we have over 17,000 customers all around the world. Lots of them in e-commerce, but not only. We have lots of large players in media, in SaaS industries as well. And all together, basically, we're generating over 1.75 trillion of searches per year, which to give you an idea, it's roughly 1/3 of what global Google traffic, right? So it's quite huge. But no need to get too much into numbers. This is not the objective of today. I'm available right after if you want to learn more about Algolia. Algolia and GenAI, we have different type of initiatives. This is just a sneak peek out of the one we have. First one is Algolia Doc Search. You may have even used Algolia without realizing, but we pour search on the vast majority of open source projects and documentation. Can that be React and many others, right? I don't know them all. And we're at the moment looking at enhancing our doc search experience with generative AI, so it can also become a companion to who you can ask questions. I have no release date, but this is in progress. Another project of ours is called Guides, previously shopping guides. This is very much tailored toward e-commerce stores. Basically, we're able to generate pages to help people in their decision making. Like you want to buy a TV, we're going to generate with LLMs pages around what are the criteria for you to look for a good TV, and so you can more easily make a choice, an informed choice. And we released a new update yesterday. And underneath, under the hood of that feature, we also going to release in global availability in the near future what we call the GenAI toolkit. So basically, this is an API first piece of resource for developers to be able to interact the best with an LLM, a large language model, along with our RAG for retrieval augmented generation. So basically, you're able to use whatever you have in your Algolia index and to use it in the context of an LLM. And this powers, for instance, shopping guides. I realize I've been already throwing some technical terms, so maybe just so we get all comfortable, if not everyone is bilingual with Take keywords such as GenAI, LLM, and so on. I have a quick glossary. So GenAI stands for generative AI, right? This is any type of AI we use, but which are likely to generate text, content, images based on patterns, right? Those technology usually rely on a lower level called an LLM, which stands for large language model. And basically we have trained these machine learning models on the global internet knowledge, if not more. So that's for the basics around GenAI. On the UX side, two key terms here: usability. You're going to hear me a lot say usability. So that's the ease of which a user, can learn, navigate, effectively interact with a product or a system. And mental model is how people think about something, right? We all have our own understanding of how internet works, how UI works, and so that forms our mental model, right? And while it's positive, it helps us navigate faster, it also comes as a, we'll see, sometimes it slow down adoption of new ways of interacting. All right, let's move on. So let's start with GenAI. Basically, with GenAI, there's a brand new paradigm that gets introduced in terms of UI. But to better understand it, I suggest we step back a bit, back to the 1940s, and we look at how we were interacting with the machine, right? And so back then, that was a time where basically people will put punch card into large machines, right? And they would put that on the evening and get the results delivered on the day after, with no interactivity and an awful usability, of course. But that was the very beginning of computing, right? Then things have evolved. In the 1960s, we started seeing like more of a UI paradigm called command-based interaction, where basically this time the user initiate an action and the system respond, right? So, well, before it was kind of a black box and you had to wait extensive and long hours. Now the system comes back to you in a timely manner. And that has been enhanced with what we know today, basically those GUI, GUI, that stands for graphical user interfaces, and also the interface tools that have evolved over time, such as the keyboard to the mouse, then to the stylus, the touch, more especially since iPhone in 2007, and now with voice for a few years now, right? But ultimately, while those UI can be really, really powerful, they also can be lead to mistake in case they have a bad usability, right? So there's a real effort to be put on those user interfaces when they're designed. Otherwise, the user they can get tricked, and ultimately they can very easily fall into cases where they're not able to do whatever they are looking to do. And so now, what's interesting with GenAI as we're moving into some new form of intelligence, right? I'm not going to debate is it kind of similar to human intelligence or not. That's not the debate today, but we get to some form of intelligence. And so we get systems who are kind of able to mimic reasoning. And with that said, basically what we see, we're entering in what experts call intent-based UX design or outcome specification. Of course, depending on who says it, they have a different wording, but everyone agrees to say that it's intent-based. This is a new paradigm, right? And this paradigm, compared to the previous one, is really centered on the fact that the user no longer needs to tell the computer what to do, right? Previously, you go on a UI and you need to click on one area, click on this button and here, and then it's step by step, it's you driving the interaction. Now, what you can do is you can tell the computer what outcome you want. And the promise of this is that you will shift the complexity from the user to the system. So a quick example of this, and I'm sure you've already all tested it here. If not yet, I would definitely encourage you to do it. It's really fun. Is generating images, right? Before, you would use a tool like Photoshop or GIMP, and you would have to take a picture and make all the modification and really be an expert of the tool. Now you can just throw like a command, a prompt to the tool, and basically like is going to deliver best on what you ask, right? And so, well, it sounds appealing, right? The promise is like, oh, I can just ask whatever I want. Question is like, is it as easy and as usable as we get sold on, right? And the reality here is like to get to the final image, which best match what I had in mind in the first place, it took me a few iterations, right? So not only I had to iterate, but also there was a bit of a learning curve. I didn't know at first place that I need to write scene feature, photorealistic water, 4K camera perspective, and so on. I didn't know, right? And also a lot of the systems, the way it works today, it was like me putting something in the system and waiting for the system to come back. So the interactivity was very limited, right? Going back almost to the first paradigm where we had those cards, you throw something in the system and then you cross your fingers and you hope that you will get something that is going to match what you were wanting. This is the current state, right? And so generative AI, more generally speaking, is like a constant, it's an active field of research, and this is the same thing for UX, right? What we observe actually is that with this new paradigm, there's also key usability challenges that comes along. In the current state, we see, I'm naming two, which are very obvious to people who have been using GenAI and LLM. Hallucination, which is a nice term to say, basically the LLM just say wrong stuff, but it does make it sound like it's true. And the lack of transparency, right? Because there's variability, there's bias, and there's this black box effect. So those are the two main ones that we can read on the internet. But ultimately, there's also other usability challenges when it comes to using those. One of them is articulation barrier. That was I was saying is like the system is as good or can deliver something as good as what you're able to express to the system, right? So you have to be really articulate in your words. You have to know what you want. And here you easily face a challenge, which is we don't know about what we don't know, right? And so while an expert can probably get the most out of an LLM today because they have expertise, they're able to articulate it the right way. Someone who has no expertise, it's harder. It does take a process to get maybe to a certain similar degree. Second point is verbose and hard to read responses, right? So we'll see on it, but generalist ChatGPT-like experiences, they're doing pretty good job. But as soon as you get into within app chat experiences powered by LLM, it's not as great. And we'll see with some example. And ultimately, but this is already true for non-generative AI, a key challenge is low discoverability. And we'll document it, but basically it's how likely you are to figure out to come across a generative AI feature in your user journey, right? Because most of the people, they tend to overlook those things if it's not implemented correctly. So it doesn't matter how good the Gen AI feature is, if you don't get to use it, you don't know. So what we see, my observation is that those challenges are amplified also by the current model, mental model, sorry. So the challenges are amplified by the current model. So the mental model, as I said, is basically the bias, the perception we have of something, how something should be working, right? And so we already observe that at Algolia. So we have we've evolved our search engine. We now are end-to-end AI search engine we call neural search, and this neural search engine is able to take full sentences, right? So you could ask, show me something. You can basically express an idea. I don't have an example, but you can express like what you're looking for as a conversation, right? As a sentence. And what we observe is that despite we turn this on, like a lot of people, they default on keyword search because this is how they've been doing it for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? And so this is our current mental model, right? And so this applies for keyword search, but it's going to apply for GenAI as well. Ultimately, everyone can change, but change is slow, and adoption rate is likely to differ by users group, right? So young people are likely to adopt faster, also because they have been exposed less to the previous way of interacting, so their mental model is maybe not as established or forged as for the others. That's the first point. Then the second one is that it's very likely that the future of AI will be hybrid, right? Because of this people shifting mental models slowly, the current UI, the graphical user interfaces and the paradigm, the second paradigm I explained, is not going to just disappear from one day to another, right? There's a high chance, and this is what we start see emerging, the chatbots, the conversational agents, they take place in existing UI and they start complementing. Because ultimately, clicking and tapping remains very intuitive, and also the graphical user interface gives us instant feedback, right? So it gives us a feeling of control, and also like it really aligns very well with our mental model. And again, we're used to it. So there's people like at IBM, they realize that, and have been putting a lots of thoughts about what's the principle for any company willing to build a strong generative experience, what they should follow, right? There's a NN group who did the 10 heuristic many years ago, and there's an evolution of that as a paradigm is shifting. So we won't get into detail here, we don't have time, but I would encourage you, if it's an interest of yours, to definitely go check out so those gating principle from IBM, and we do have a blog post on it. So if you go see on Algolia blog, you will get a sneak peek. Otherwise, there is a full research paper for people who are more into it. So that's for the paradigm. What we've learned is that there's lots of challenges, right? And so while I'm not, we're not going to cover with exhaustivity, but at least for today, what I wanted is to focus on two of those. How can we optimize discoverability, and how we can optimize usability? So let's focus on discoverability. So when it comes to discoverability, basically this is a concept that comes along with findability, but there is a distinction. Findability is more when user can easily find something they're actively looking for, right? I want to search, I know I'm searching for the search bar, but ultimately the best is to optimize for discoverability, because basically this is the stage where users notice, recognize, and understand even when they were not previously aware that it existence, right? And this is exactly the case in which we are, because ultimately what we're saying is that those GenAI things are brand new. They're bringing lots of innovation that most of the people haven't heard before. So how do we expose it the right way for them so they don't miss it? If you're interested in learning more about findability and discoverability, there's a really good video on YouTube from the NN group. Overall, all the videos are really good, to be honest. Very entry level, like it's accessible to everyone. So it's a good place to start if you're interested. So what NN Group did is they do user research. So user research, basically, they bring people, they make them sit down and they ask them action, right? Go on Amazon.com and search for this, right? And then they just like record and they ask questions and they see how people just interact, regular people, right? From different age, different groups and so on. And so here what they found out is that despite the fact Amazon has really been like leading the game and probably one of the first to release a shopping assistant per se on their website, and that really experienced people, they noticed that the participants of the user research still were kind of struggling with some usability issues, right? Once they were exposed, once the interviewer told them that Rufus, the shopping assistant, exists, everyone was amazed, they loved it, but ultimately, they didn't see it at the first place, right? And so what is highlighted by the study, the article available on their website, is that here some of the issues were the unexpected placement. As we can see, basically to trigger Rufus, it's in the navigation bar. Most of the chatbots for the several years now are always located at the bottom right. So here people didn't really notice that there is something related to a chatbot as it was part of the navigation. Another one is unclear labeling. Rufus, what does that mean? People, it doesn't refer to anything, right? It probably would have been more self-explanatory, like something like assistant or AI assistant. Rufus didn't ring a bell to anyone. And ultimately, also ambiguous iconography, more especially on mobile. On mobile, we could say it's very well located, bottom right, it's easy access with the thumb. But here again, there was confusion according to the research, because they use a star, which seems to be the emerging pattern to say AI magic thing, but they actually merged it with bubbles. And so because of this, it wasn't recognized by people as something which was AI related, and most people overlooked it. You can see it can be as small as this, right? And it plays a big role if you're developing a generative AI feature. You want this feature to be adopted, right? Because your project probably also depends on this. Because regardless of how cool what you build, if there's no adoption, there's a high chance that budget gets cut at some point, right? So you also want to optimize for usage and discoverability. On the other end, Amazon have another website more for developers, where they have they provide the assistant, the chat assistant as a product. It's called Q. And what they do well, I found on this website, is that here they provide a brand new experience. You can actually, there's a feature on the bottom right of the website here. you can actually turn it on and you can select any text on the web page and it just explains it to you. So if there's like jargon, new terms you don't know, you just select and it's going to just leverage the GenAI to explain it to you and you can engage with it. Pretty amazing, right? But how do you discover this thing? So what they did is they went as far as having a guided onboarding. So the first time you load the page, it tells you, here you get a gist with explainer, right? Here's how it works. You get a small video. So yes, you can dismiss it, but at least people have been exposed to it. The other thing they do in a different manner than on Amazon.com, here they actually follow the pattern having the chatbot on the bottom right, which is more of where people expect it to be according to their mental model. And also what they have found interesting is that they reinforce the presence over time. So the first time you open it, it has some notification. It says, oh, need more info, highlight any text, it tells you there's a small red bubble. It's actually really stand out in terms of contrast and so on. So you see it, it's hard to miss. And when you come back after on the website, assuming that you closed this, it say, hey, welcome back, right? Which is such a great pattern because ultimately it's not because you've been exposed to something once that you remember it, right? So in order for you to evolve your mental model, you have to be exposed and again and really realize that there's something. And here they're just drawing your attention and they're like saying, yeah, I'm here, happy to help, right? So smart, I loved it. I think I'm going to steal it from them. Another aspect as well is, we'll touch on it right after, but basically you can also drive, you want to integrate those GenAI feature where basically the user flow is already, right? And so one way of doing this is most of the website, they have suggestions, search suggestions. And so this is also something that has come up from the research on NN Group. They noticed that basically on Amazon, they were showing the prompt suggestion, AI prompt suggestion, just underneath the query suggestion, but like users were not really engaging with it. And so one of the hypotheses is that basically like it was not different enough for people to even notice it, right? They were just like focused on their mental model, they search, many of them probably didn't notice. So one potential alternative could be maybe to make it more visually stand out, right? So instead of having piled up on one column, something we're exploring on the Algolia side, and this is a potential version of Algolia.com. If you go on Algolia.com, this is not the current version. We're just exploring at that stage. But one of the hypotheses we have is like, is this more visible if people actually have the thing on the right column? Because it does potentially visually more stand out. But that can be the kind of tweaks that you can make to make discoverability better. On the Gemini side, and I'm going to wrap up this section with Gemini, what I found is great is that they don't even talk about assistant here. They just, you're in your workflow, and there's this thing at the bottom right, which sounds appealing, like analyze this data. Who using Google Sheet has never thought like, everyone wants to analyze data, of course, right? And so like here you have the icon, which we're going to see is consistent. And so it's very appealing, right? So I clicked, and then ultimately it opens the assistant, right? And it's going to start doing the work on the sidebar. And so now you're aware that there's an assistant. And now that I've understood that when I click here, I am able to recognize that this icon is actually present in multiple places, right? So I can start linking and making a mental link in my mind about the UI, like, okay, here's Gemini, that seems to be the assistant. This is similar to what I clicked, and oh, same icon. So I assume that if I click here, it's probably going to open this thing next time. So you see there's consistency. So in a nutshell, it's really important to leverage existing pattern, right? So there's large companies like Amazon, Google, and others. They invest millions, if not billions of dollars on GenAI, trying to craft the best product ever, and they have teams of experts, right? So, and also their reach is massive. So whatever they deploy is going to get exposed to lots of people, and people are probably going to start making them evolve their mental model on those new experiences. So if you're not as big and you're willing to expose your GenAI, a good thing is probably to leverage, look at the pattern existing and try to mimic them as long as they match for you. Use contextual placement. This is what we saw on Gemini. Do progressive onboarding. This is what we've seen on Amazon Q. Reinforce habits and do user testing. Then you want to optimize usability, and I'm going to accelerate quickly. So you want to use prompt suggestion. As I was saying, we've seen an example in algolia.com, prototype. Ultimately, there's 3 types of suggestions, like use case prompt suggestions. Those are the one you open the assistant, it tells you what you can do. So it's really good for learning what you can actually do. There's prompt autocomplete suggestions, which are really good for increasing efficiency. And then ultimately, there's the follow-up questions, right? Once you started interacting with the bot, the chat assistant, in the same way as in real life, the person would ask you a follow-up question, right? So here, this way it keeps you engaged. Ultimately, by providing all those 3, or any of the 3, you're able to reduce cognitive load and reduce interaction cost. Interaction cost is how much it costs me as a user to interact with the machine, right? This is for the UI side. There's also an opportunity to optimize the response from the LLM, from the GenAI features, more especially when they're conversational. So NN Group said, user don't read, they scan. Basically, they estimate in their research that on a web page, traditional web page, people, they just consume 20% of the content. And so to accommodate their behavior, content writers, for a decade now, use techniques like chunking, bullet point, strategic formatting to improve scannability. And well, what we observe is that those industry-leading ChatGPTs, they do it. You named it, like Le Chat, Claude, ChatGPT, probably used to it, and you find the answer pretty neat, right? It's clean, it's convenient, but the reality is, as soon as you get into something more in-app, you don't necessarily experience the same experience, right? And so this is where there's an opportunity as well for anyone building GenAI products. So few rules, less is more. You have an example on the left. Here, you want to be concise, right? Bullet points, straight to the point. You want to also format for scannability. So here we have textually the same content, but one has more breadth in terms of spacing, also more emphasis on the beginning of the sentence, so it's very easy to scan. So here I can just read generative AI, popular tools, common, and if I'm interested, I can read the rest of the sentence. So this is very much optimizing for scannability. And the last one, and this is not new, it's not new to the internet, it's not new to content writing even, it's using the inverted pyramid, right? Really putting at the very top whatever is most important for the user. So this way, if they drop, they still get the substance of what was the most important. And if they're willing to explore more, they can. But at least they're not missing on the most important things. So in a nutshell, again, you want to leverage existing patterns, take inspiration from journalist ChatGPT UX. You want to guide users with prompt suggestions, keep response concise, optimize for scannability, and lead with what matters. Sorry. And ultimately, again, do user testing, because this is new. Your user may not behave exactly the same way. And so this is really important to iterate on early phases, even more than A/B testing that does require extensive set of users afterwards. So as I said, this is very much kind of me sharing my learning journey, working on project at Algolia, reading thought leadership content on the internet. So if you want to embark on the same journey as me and you're interested in learning more around those content, I can only recommend you to go check out articles and video on NN Group, the Google Peer Guidebook, our Algolia blog post, but also the IBM design principles. So that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and don't hesitate to reach out on social media or just grab a drink afterwards. Thank you.
We have some time for questions for Alex. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Alex, what's your take on, I would call it, personification of those agents? So you mentioned an example of Rufus, so Amazon gave it a name, versus Gemini that hides it for the usual user under an icon. What's the relationship? What's the better one to choose?
In terms of naming the feature?
In terms of UI, how you show it. Like, do you give it a name because it builds relationships, or do you hide it because it's not important for the end user?
I mean, I'm going to answer with what's top of mind, right? I haven't conducted any extensive research. What I do observe that everyone seems to go with his own name, right? Everyone like to have name. Certain players seems to have more consistency than others. Like Gemini means a lot of products on the Google side. On the Amazon side, we see that they make a distinction between Amazon Q, which is more for developers, versus Rufus, which is more consumer focused. For me, generally speaking, when we also make recommendation to Algolia customer in regards to their search and discovery experience, I think it's like we suggest to go with simplicity, avoid jargons, go with it has to be as self-explanatory for users as possible. And so here, what we've seen, at least in the NN Group user research, is that Rufus was not necessarily ringing the bell for anyone, right? And so people were not able to understand what's Rufus, right? And so they just passed over. Versus, but it would be interesting. I wonder if they did conduct research. I will have a look. But I wonder if they did conduct user research and A/B testing, instead of calling it Rufus in the navigation bar, just call it like AI assistant. Yeah. I'm sure they did. So yeah. Oh yeah, good question.
I think also like they didn't communicate too much on this part of introduce like AI for consumer. I mean, I didn't know this.
Yeah, and for now it's also limited to certain countries. So for example, I had to connect on Amazon.com, go through a VPN to be based in the US. Whereas as a French, in France, there is a lots of things we don't get at the first place, also mostly because of regulation and GDPR. So we have we're more careful in expanding, like deploying their stuff, because they know it's also conflicts with some of the regulation. Can we take a last one? Is there any last question?
Just to continue on this one, why they didn't use the same interface as Intercom and other AI assistant? Why to reinvent something new? Why just not to? I
mean, it's a good question. I think I wish we would have someone from Amazon in the room. I think it's a really good one. But ultimately, again, what the research highlights, and there might be other kind of conflicting research, but at least the pattern today, they have the assistant on the bottom right? And maybe this has been kind of crowded, and they didn't want people to think this is yet another of those like dummy chatbot, and they really wanted to differentiate and not like fall into that category. So maybe that was a reason behind it, right? Stand out of the crowd, because it's very true as well that there's lots of those chat assistants which are just sales representative, and they're not that smart, right? They're not necessarily LLM powered. Cool.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex.
Perfect.
Another round of applause.
Thanks very much for your question and for having me, and happy to grab a drink after. Thank you.